When we first took a look at Palworld a few months ago, I'm sure even the people who didn't just jump on the hype train, but very much steered it, expected to see this game becoming one of the most successful Steam games of all time in a matter of days. We are talking the second highest player peak count in Steam's history here, surpassing even Counter-Strike. But you know what, now that it's here, and we saw not only the game's massive potential, but also the stuff that's already in the game, that is brimming with passion and dedication, it actually makes perfect sense that this game is breaking all records right now. Palworld is ticking a lot of popular boxes from various genres that have a huge player base. I have seen many streamers and players basically sell this as a Pokemon with guns. But aside from the truth that you can indeed have fictional creatures with guns, this game is much more similar to Ark or even Breath of the Wild than Pokemon. In fact, there are no traditional trainer fights, no real story, and no gyms. Instead, Palworld is an open world, creature collecting, survival crafting, and base building game, and a pretty damn good one at that. It becomes obvious the moment you start reading through your survival guide and setting foot into this open world that the developers cared about what they are doing here and made sure to not make the same mistakes and questionable design choices that are often present in other survival crafting games. That's not to say that the game is perfect, of course. There are plenty of things that need improvement, but more on that later. If you've played Ark, you'll feel right at home here. And if you haven't played Ark, well, you won't have a hard time getting used to the game's mechanics either. The learning curve really isn't that steep, despite the game offering quite a bit of content. But let's start from the beginning. You start this by adjusting the world settings and conditions to your liking, as well as of course creating your own character. You know the drill by now. If you wish, you can make your character an abomination as well, which some people just seem to want to do. So we'll consider this one a plus right there. Heading into the actual game, we're waking up on this rather mysterious, but also very populated island. At first, our main objective is simply to survive, so we are not wasting much time and start gathering our most basic resources that we immediately find once we set foot on this island. For now, all of this is done by hand. However, as we gain experience and our first level ups, we are not just rewarded with stat points, but also unlock more crafting options in the technology section, which is very similar to the engrams in Ark. With each level, you unlock new tools, buildings, weapons, and possibilities. And as we build our first basic crafting bench, we now have more options. We can gather resources faster by using the appropriate tools, get ourselves a campfire to prepare food, and perhaps most importantly, we can craft our first Pal Sphere, aka Pokeball, to catch our first Pal. And it is at this point that the game opens up to you, because not only can you use your Pals in combat, they are also an essential workforce at the base you will set up. Setting up a base is easy. You unlock your Pal box by leveling up a bit more, which you do by doing basically anything in the game, but most efficiently by capturing a lot of Pals. And you place that Pal box at whichever location you want, which then creates a pretty big zone around it, where you can build. Let it be said right away that you are not restricted to one base later on in the game. The first Pal box will create your first main base, however, where you will build essential production and crafting buildings, as well as your own home. You'll also build quite a bit of stuff that your Pals need in order to happily work at your base, like Pal beds, berry plantations, to provide them with food, or a spa to reduce stress levels and regain sanity. Thankfully, this game has a pretty decent tutorial that should get you started with little to no issues. At first, you'll want to absolutely prioritize leveling up your Pal box, because this allows you to increase the number of Pals that can simultaneously work at your base, and later on the number of total bases you can have. Pretty soon you'll also notice that you're not alone on this island. You can turn raids on or off in the world settings if you have it turned on, which I recommend. Every few days you'll get raided either by one of the hostile guilds or a group of Pals that start off pretty weak, but increases in difficulty as you level up your character and your base. You will notice that everything you have been doing by hand for now is instead now done by the Pals you captured, provided they have the necessary work suitability, of course, because your Lamball surely won't water your plants for you. Its only purpose is actually handiwork, and well, looking darn cute. before watering your plants. You'll have to get yourself a pal that has the necessary work suitability, like a Pengule. And this applies to everything at your base. It is at this point where I can't continue this video without having talked about the animations in this game at least once, because they are part of what makes the game so enjoyable. Every single pal has unique and passionately crafted animations, and they make your base come to life. I play this game solo and have not once felt lonely at my base. There is such high level of detail that it gives each pal its very own personality. But I'm not gonna spend too much time trying to convince you of this. I'm sure the footage you're seeing right now is demonstrating that better than I ever could with my words. Let's talk outside base stuff. What else is there to do, despite optimizing your base and looking at cute pals working? Well, while this is of course one of the hard components here, there is actually quite a large world waiting to get explored by you and your pals. You'll have to head out further and further, because you'll want to unlock more useful and better stuff that requires more rare and advanced resources, which can be found either overworld or in the dungeons. Now the dungeons I have experienced are all a bit samey looking and not that exciting, but they get the job done in terms of offering you a way to farm resources and also pals and XP. But you shouldn't expect any sophisticated complex dungeon design or something. However, it is of course possible that this is coming in the future, especially since the game lists raid bosses as a planned update. You'll also find many bosses scattered around the map that, once defeated, will reward you with ancient technology points. There are a total of 5 tower bosses and a total of 42 alpha pal bosses scattered around the map. And the map is honestly massive. Now I won't show you too much of the late game stuff, but I can tell you that I'm around 25 hours into the game and haven't even discovered 30% of the map. I have also only done one of the 5 main tower bosses so far. It's definitely plenty to keep you occupied for a while, especially since some of the bosses are quite challenging. Let's talk a bit more about the pals themselves. Each pal has its own attributes, skills and work suitabilities, and there are around 120 different pals in early access, which is a very decent amount, especially given that all of them are uniquely animated. If you find that at one point you'll have more pals than you can possibly use at your bases, you can sell them to merchants for gold, and later on you can even breed and condense them, but I'm not gonna completely spoil how that works. It's just important to say that there's always an incentive to keep capturing pals, as they will continuously bring you at least some form of value. There are also lucky pals that can be compared to a shiny Pokemon. Those pals are pretty rare, as you would expect. Personally, in around 25 hours, I have only seen 3 of them, and one was unfortunately killed by my pal before I even got a chance to capture it. Should you manage to capture one, those pals have increased size and often better stats. I think by now I have made it pretty obvious that I do enjoy this game very much for what it is. A very fun base building crafting game with a pretty unique twist. I don't think you should see it as a Pokemon clone at all, despite the fictional creatures. There are little similarities. And again, Pokemon also took inspiration from other games before becoming popular. But that doesn't mean there aren't any issues worth talking about. I can summarize what I'm about to say in one sentence. You simply notice that the game is indeed in early access and not a full release. Anyways, here are the things I've found that are worth mentioning. The world sometimes feels a bit empty when you're not at your base, and at times feels a little thrown together. Some areas are great and dense, but there are also parts that lack any real, cohesive world building. It's not procedurally generated, and that's a plus in my opinion, but it certainly does feel a bit soul or lifeless at times. Especially the settlements have room for improvement. There are AI pathing issues that the developers are already aware of, and it is on their top priority list. All the bugs I've encountered were mostly visual and didn't negatively affect or ruin my experience, but there definitely are a few bugs, like you would expect. I also want to mention, however, that the game runs absolutely great on the majority of systems. I haven't experienced any noticeable stutters or frame drops, and 0 crashes, so that is commendable for an early access title. This game presents an intriguing mix of familiar elements in a new context, and despite some issues, you can and most likely will have a ton of fun in this game. you should be aware of its early access state. And if you're remotely into survival crafting, base building games with a touch of Pokemon and won't mind the occasional early access inconvenience or missing feature, then absolutely go for this one. If this video helped you out or entertained you, you can make all the difference with a single like. It does tremendously help with my video's performance. See ya.